A black family, the Johnsons, moves into a seemingly idyllic suburban neighborhood, only to face unexpected hostility from a longtime resident, Mrs. Thompson. When the Johnsons throw a welcoming barbecue to connect with their new neighbors, tensions escalate and a 911 call is made, triggering a police response. But when the police arrive and discover who they're dealing with, the entire neighborhood is left stunned. What happened at the Johnsons' barbecue that made everyone realize they were not just dealing with a simple neighborhood dispute, but a significant moment of reckoning? Let's find out. But before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy this tale of community and redemption, don't forget to subscribe. The sun shone brightly over the quaint suburban neighborhood of Maplewood, casting a golden glow on the well-manicured lawns and neatly trimmed hedges. It was the kind of place where children rode their bikes along tree-lined streets and families gathered for block parties during the summer. The homes, mostly two-story with brick facades and white picket fences, reflected the peaceful and comfortable lives of the residents. The people of Maplewood were a mix of longtime inhabitants and new arrivals. Some families had lived there for generations, while others were drawn to the area for its good schools, safe streets, and strong sense of community. It was a neighborhood where everyone knew each other, where neighbors waved from their porches and exchanged small talk while tending to their gardens. To an outsider, Maplewood seemed like an idyllic place to raise a family. But beneath the surface, not everything was as perfect as it appeared. There were unspoken tensions, particularly among those who had been there the longest. They were not fond of change, especially when it came in the form of new families who didn't quite fit their idea of what a Maplewood resident should be. This undercurrent of unease was something the Johnson family was blissfully unaware of as they pulled up to their new home on Birchwood Lane. The Johnsons were an impressive family. Michael Johnson, the father, was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a calm demeanor that belied his strength. His deep brown skin and neatly trimmed beard gave him an air of quiet authority. He had recently been appointed as the new police chief, a position that he had earned through years of hard work and dedication. His wife, Angela, was a warm and graceful woman with a welcoming smile. She was a schoolteacher, beloved by her students for her patience and kindness. Their two children, Jasmine and Kevin, were bright and full of energy. Jasmine, at 13, was starting to blossom into a confident young woman, while 8-year-old Kevin was a bundle of curiosity, always eager to explore the world around him. The Johnsons had been searching for the perfect home for months, and when they found the house on Birchwood Lane, they knew it was the one. It was a charming 2-story home with a wide front porch, a spacious backyard, and enough room for their growing family. As they stepped out of the car, the excitement was palpable. "This is it," Angela exclaimed, her eyes sparkling as she took in the sight of their new home. "Our new beginning." Michael smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "It's perfect," he agreed. "I can already see us making so many memories here." Jasmine and Kevin were already racing towards the front door, eager to explore every corner of the house. As Michael and Angela followed them inside, they couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. They had worked hard to reach this point, and now they were ready to settle into their new life in Maplewood. But as the Johnsons unpacked their belongings and started to make the house their own, they were unaware that not everyone in the neighborhood was as welcoming as they had hoped. Across the street, in a house that was just as neat and tidy as the others, an older woman stood at her window, watching the new arrivals with a critical eye. Mrs. Edith Thompson was a fixture in Maplewood. She had lived there for nearly 40 years and considered herself the unofficial gatekeeper of the neighborhood. At 72, she was still sharp and spry, with a head of silver hair always perfectly styled and a wardrobe of pressed blouses and slacks. On the surface, Mrs. Thompson was the picture of a proper lady, polite, well-mannered, and always ready with a smile for her neighbors. But beneath that veneer lay deep-seated prejudices that she kept carefully hidden behind a mask of civility. To Mrs. Thompson, Maplewood was a bastion of traditional values, a place where everyone knew their place and where things were done a certain way. She had watched with dismay as the neighborhood began to change over the years, with new families moving in who didn't share her vision of what Maplewood should be. And now, as she watched the Johnsons settle into their new home, she felt a familiar knot of resentment tightening in her chest. More of them, she muttered to herself, her lips thinning into a disapproving line. Just what this neighborhood needs. She continued to watch as Michael and Angela helped their children carry boxes into the house, her gaze cold and calculating. She knew who Michael was. Everyone in Maplewood had heard about the new police chief, but that did little to soften her feelings. In her mind, the Johnsons were interlopers, people who didn't belong in her neighborhood. The first time Mrs. Thompson met the Johnsons was a few days after they moved in. She had been walking her dog, a small, yappy terrier named Buttons, when she spotted Angela in the front yard, planting flowers. Deciding that it was her duty to introduce herself, Mrs. Thompson approached with a tight smile. "Good morning," she called out, her voice clipped and formal. Angela looked up, wiping her hands on her gardening gloves. "Good morning," she replied cheerfully. "You must be one of our new neighbors. I'm Angela Johnson." Mrs. Thompson nodded curtly. "Edith Thompson," she introduced herself. "I've lived in this neighborhood for many years." "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Thompson," Angela said, still smiling despite the cool reception. "We're so excited to be here. Everyone seems so friendly." Mrs. Thompson murmured noncommittally, her eyes scanning Angela from head to toe. "It's certainly different now." Angela's smile faltered slightly, but she kept her tone polite. "Change can be good, don't you think?" "Perhaps," Mrs. Thompson replied, her tone suggesting that she didn't think so at all. She glanced at the flowers Angela was planting. "Those are nice. I hope they'll grow well in this soil." "I hope so too," Angela said, her voice still warm, but with a hint of uncertainty. "I'm still getting used to the garden. Do you have any tips?" Mrs. Thompson shrugged, already losing interest in the conversation. "Just make sure you water them properly," she said vaguely. "Well, I must be going." "Good day, Mrs. Johnson." "Good day, Mrs. Thompson," Angela replied, watching as the older woman walked away, her back stiff with disapproval. As Mrs. Thompson continued her walk, she felt a sense of satisfaction. She had done her duty as a neighbor, but she had also made it clear that she wasn't about to roll out the welcome mat for the Johnsons. They would have to earn their place in Maplewood, and in her eyes, that was unlikely to happen. Over the next few days, the Johnsons tried to get to know their neighbors, but they found it more challenging than they had anticipated. While some were friendly and welcoming, others were distant, offering only polite nods and brief hellos. It was subtle, but there was an undeniable undercurrent of tension that Michael and Angela couldn't quite put their finger on. One afternoon, Michael decided to introduce himself to Mrs. Thompson. He had seen her several times, always walking her dog or tending to her rose bushes, and he thought it would be good to make a formal introduction. He walked across the street and knocked on her door, smiling when she answered. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Thompson," he said warmly. "I'm Michael Johnson, your new neighbor." Mrs. Thompson looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "Yes, I've seen you around," she replied. "I suppose you're settling in." "We are, thank you," Michael said, still smiling despite her lukewarm response. "It's a lovely neighborhood. We're looking forward to being a part of the community." Mrs. Thompson nodded slowly. "I hope you find it to your liking," she said, her tone making it clear that she wasn't particularly concerned if they did or didn't. Michael chuckled softly, trying to ease the tension. I'm sure we will. It's a big change for us, but we're excited. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson replied, though there was no warmth in her voice. I'll keep that in mind. Michael could tell that the conversation was over, so he nodded politely. Well, it was nice to meet you, Mrs. Thompson. I'll let you get back to your day. Good day, Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Thompson said, closing the door without another word. As Michael walked back to his house, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Mrs. Thompson had been polite, but there was an unmistakable edge to her demeanor. It was as if she was tolerating them rather than welcoming them, and it left him with a sense of unease. Angela noticed it too. She wasn't very friendly, was she? She remarked when Michael told her about the encounter. No, not really, Michael admitted. But maybe she's just set in her ways. I'm sure she'll warm up eventually. Angela nodded, but she wasn't entirely convinced. There was something about Mrs. Thompson that made her feel uncomfortable, and it wasn't just the woman's frosty demeanor. It was the way she looked at them, like they were intruders in her world. As the days went by, the Johnsons continued to settle into their new home, making small improvements and getting to know the area. The children started school, and Michael began his new role as police chief, diving into the responsibilities that came with the position. Despite the underlying tension, life in Maplewood was beginning to fall into a rhythm for the Johnson family. They attended community events, explored the local parks, and even hosted a small housewarming gathering for a few of their new neighbors. Yet, the subtle exclusion and passive-aggressive behavior from Mrs. Thompson persisted. It wasn't overt, but it was there, in the way she barely acknowledged them when they passed by, or how she conveniently forgot to invite them to certain neighborhood gatherings. There were also the little comments she made whenever she did interact with them, remarks that were seemingly innocent, but carried an unmistakable undercurrent of prejudice. Your children are so well-behaved, she remarked once, her tone dripping with surprise. You must be very strict with them. Angela smiled tightly, knowing full well what Mrs. Thompson was implying. We believe in raising them with respect and love, she replied, keeping her voice steady. Just like any other parent. Mrs. Thompson nodded, her eyes narrowing slightly. Of course, she said, before changing the subject without missing a beat. It was clear that she didn't consider the Johnsons to be like any other parent. There were other neighbors who, while not as openly cold as Mrs. Thompson, seemed to share her unease. When the Johnsons tried to strike up conversations or extend invitations, they were often met with polite but distant responses. The Johnsons were included, but only in a way that was just enough to avoid outright rudeness. One Saturday morning, as the family prepared to enjoy a day at home, Michael noticed Mrs. Thompson walking her dog past their house again. She paused for a moment, as if considering whether to acknowledge him or not. Michael, determined to be friendly, waved at her. "Morning, Mrs. Thompson," he called out. She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson," she replied stiffly before continuing on her way. Michael sighed as he turned back to the house where Angela was setting out breakfast. "I don't know what it is with her," he said as he sat down. "I try to be friendly, but it's like she has this wall up." Angela nodded, placing a plate of pancakes in front of Kevin. "I've noticed it too," she said. "It's more than just being set in her ways. I think she doesn't want us here. Maybe she's just not used to new people," Jasmine offered, ever the optimist. "Maybe," Michael agreed, though he wasn't entirely convinced. He'd dealt with enough people in his line of work to recognize when someone had deeper issues with him, and he had a feeling that Mrs. Thompson's problem went beyond simple discomfort with change. The neighborhood continued to reveal its true colors in small, almost imperceptible ways. The Johnsons would often overhear snippets of conversations from their neighbors that hinted at underlying prejudices. They heard about how the neighborhood used to be different or how things aren't like they used to be. It was always vague, always couched in terms that could be dismissed as nostalgia, but the Johnsons knew what was really being said. One evening, as they sat on the porch after dinner, enjoying the cool breeze, Angela brought up something that had been on her mind. "Do you ever think about what it would have been like if we'd moved somewhere else?" she asked, leaning against Michael. Michael looked out at the quiet street, the houses all darkening as the sun set. "I do," he admitted. "But we can't live our lives in fear of what other people think. We belong here just as much as anyone else." Angela nodded, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I know, but sometimes it feels like we're always going to be the outsiders." "We won't be," Michael said firmly. "This is our home now, and we're going to make it work, no matter what anyone else thinks." As time passed, the Johnsons continued to focus on building their life in Maplewood despite the challenges. They knew they were being watched, judged even, but they refused to let it deter them from being themselves. Michael threw himself into his work, making strides in his new role as police chief, determined to be a positive force in the community. Angela found solace in her teaching, where she could make a difference in the lives of her students, many of whom came from diverse backgrounds. The children were settling into their new school, making friends and adjusting to the rhythms of their new environment. Jasmine, with her outgoing personality, quickly found a group of friends, while Kevin, though quieter, began to enjoy his time at school as well. They were beginning to feel at home, despite the subtle tensions that lingered. However, Mrs. Thompson's presence was a constant reminder that not everyone was pleased with their arrival. She continued her routine of walking her dog past their house, always with the same expression of disapproval, always with the same cold greetings. It was clear that she had no intention of welcoming them into the fold. One afternoon, as Angela was out in the front yard tending to her flower beds, Mrs. Thompson stopped by again. This time, she didn't just pass by. She paused, looking down at the flowers with a critical eye. "Those petunias," Mrs. Thompson began, her tone as sharp as ever, "they don't do well in the shade, you know." Angela looked up from her work, wiping her hands on her gardening apron. "Thank you for the advice, Mrs. Thompson. I'll keep an eye on them." Mrs. Thompson didn't acknowledge the thanks. Instead, she seemed to be scrutinizing Angela, as if searching for something to criticize. There was a long pause, and for a moment, it seemed like Mrs. Thompson was going to say something more. But then she just nodded again, a short, abrupt motion. "Good day, Mrs. Johnson," she said before turning on her heel and walking away, Buttons trotting along beside her. Angela watched her go, the tension in her shoulders slowly easing as Mrs. Thompson disappeared down the street. It was the same every time. These interactions that were polite on the surface but always left her feeling unsettled. She couldn't help but wonder what Mrs. Thompson was really thinking, what she said behind closed doors. Later that evening, Angela shared the encounter with Michael as they sat on the back porch, the kids playing in the yard. "She just can't seem to let it go," Angela said, her frustration evident. "It's like she's waiting for us to slip up, to give her a reason to say, 'I told you so.'" Michael nodded, his expression thoughtful. "She's stuck in her ways," he said. "But that doesn't mean we have to let her get to us. We'll keep doing what we're doing, living our lives. She'll either come around or she won't. But we're not going anywhere." Angela smiled at him, grateful for his steady presence. "You're right," she said, leaning against him. "We'll make this work, no matter what." As the days turned into weeks, the Johnsons continued to navigate their new life in Maplewood. They knew they were being watched, judged, and perhaps even resented by some of their neighbors. But they also knew that they had just as much right to be there as anyone else. They weren't about to let the attitudes of a few people dictate their happiness. The Johnson family had always believed in the power of community, and with Michael's new role as the police chief, they saw an opportunity to bring their neighbors together. The idea of hosting a neighborhood barbecue had been brewing in Angela's mind for weeks, and one evening, as the family sat down for dinner, she decided to bring it up. "What do you all think about having a barbecue next weekend?" Angela asked, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "We could invite the neighbors, get to know them better, and celebrate your new job, Michael." Jasmine immediately perked up at the idea. "That sounds awesome, Mom. We could have games, music, and tons of food." Kevin, though usually quieter, nodded in agreement. "I think it's a great idea. It could help us fit in more, you know." Michael smiled at his family, feeling a surge of pride. "I think it's a wonderful idea, too. We've met a few of the neighbors, but this could be a good way to really connect with them. Plus, who doesn't love a good barbecue?" The decision was made, and over the next few days, the Johnsons threw themselves into planning the event. Angela started crafting a menu that would cater to everyone's tastes, including a mix of traditional barbecue dishes and a few vegetarian options. Michael focused on setting up the backyard, making sure the grill was in perfect working order and the seating arrangements were comfortable. "We should make sure to personally invite everyone," Michael suggested one evening as they worked on the guest list. "It'll show that we really want them to be there." Angela agreed. "Absolutely. I'll start with the neighbors we've already met, and then we can work our way around the block." Jasmine volunteered to make colorful invitations, spending an entire afternoon cutting out shapes and decorating them with bright, cheerful designs. She was excited to play hostess, imagining how much fun it would be to have everyone in the neighborhood gathered in their backyard. As the day of the barbecue drew closer, the Johnsons began their rounds, going door to door to invite their neighbors. Most of the invitations were met with polite smiles and promises to try to attend. Some neighbors seemed genuinely interested, while others were more reserved, offering non-committal responses. When it came time to invite Mrs. Thompson, Angela decided to take the lead. She knew the older woman had been less than welcoming, but she wanted to extend the invitation nonetheless, hoping it might help thaw the ice between them. Angela walked over to Mrs. Thompson's house, Jasmine by her side, holding the brightly decorated invitation. They stood on the porch for a moment, Angela taking a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. After a brief wait, Mrs. Thompson opened the door, her expression as stern as ever. "Yes," she said, her eyes narrowing slightly as she saw who was standing there. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Thompson," Angela began with a warm smile. "We wanted to invite you to a barbecue we're hosting this weekend at our place. It's just a casual get-together, a chance to meet everyone and celebrate Michael's new role as police chief." Jasmine held out the invitation, her smile as bright as the colors she'd used to decorate it. "We hope you can make it," she said sweetly. Mrs. Thompson glanced at the invitation, but made no move to take it. "A barbecue, you say?" she asked, her tone cool. "I'm not sure that's something I'd be interested in." Angela kept her smile, though she could feel the tension in the air. "We'd love to have you there. It's just a simple neighborhood gathering. We thought it might be nice for everyone to get to know each other better." Mrs. Thompson's eyes flicked between Angela and Jasmine, and after a long pause, she finally took the invitation, though she didn't look at it. "I'll have to check my schedule," she said, her voice devoid of any real warmth. "But I wouldn't count on me being there. I'm quite busy, you know." Angela nodded, maintaining her composure. "Of course. If you can make it, we'd love to see you. If not, we understand." Mrs. Thompson gave a curt nod, then glanced down at Jasmine. "Children should be seen and not heard," she remarked, almost as an afterthought, before stepping back inside and closing the door without another word. As Angela and Jasmine walked back to their house, Jasmine looked up at her mother, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Mom, Why doesn't Mrs. Thompson like us? Angela sighed, putting an arm around her daughter's shoulders. Some people are just set in their ways, sweetie. They don't always understand or accept new things. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to be kind and include them. Jasmine nodded, though she didn't fully understand. I hope she comes, she said softly. Angela smiled down at her. Me too, Jasmine. Me too. Back at home, Angela shared the encounter with Michael. He listened thoughtfully, his face serious. She's not going to come, he said after a moment. But that's not the point. We're doing the right thing by inviting her. Angela nodded. I know. I just wish she could see that we're not here to change anything. We just want to be part of the community. Michael wrapped his arms around her, offering comfort. We'll keep being ourselves, Angela. That's all we can do. If she doesn't want to join us, that's her choice. As the day of the barbecue approached, Mrs. Thompson found herself increasingly agitated. The very idea of the Johnsons hosting a neighborhood event felt like an affront to her sense of order. In her mind, they were outsiders who didn't belong in Maplewood, and she resented their efforts to fit in. The thought of them taking on a central role in the community only deepened her resentment. Unable to contain her frustration, Mrs. Thompson began reaching out to other longtime residents, subtly planting seeds of doubt and fear about the Johnsons. She'd start with seemingly innocent comments, but they always carried a darker undertone. Did you hear about the barbecue the Johnsons are hosting? She asked one neighbor during their morning walk. It's quite a bold move, don't you think? I'm not sure they understand the kind of neighborhood this is. We've always kept things very traditional around here. The neighbor, an older woman who had lived in Maplewood for decades, nodded thoughtfully. It does seem a bit different. I'm not sure how I feel about it. Mrs. Thompson pounced on the opportunity. Exactly. I mean, it's fine if they want to have a little get-together, but we should be careful not to let things change too much. We've worked hard to keep this neighborhood a certain way. Her words began to spread through the community, subtly influencing the way some neighbors viewed the Johnsons. Where there had been curiosity and cautious friendliness before, there was now a sense of unease. Some began to wonder if the Johnsons would truly fit in, or if they were going to disrupt the delicate balance of their close-knit community. As the day of the barbecue drew near, Mrs. Thompson became more and more convinced that the Johnsons were a threat to everything she held dear. She couldn't stand the thought of them winning over the neighborhood, becoming a part of the fabric of Maplewood. To her, they represented change, and change was something she could not tolerate. On the morning of the barbecue, the Johnsons were busy with final preparations. The backyard was set up with tables and chairs, a grill station, and a buffet table laden with food. Angela had outdone herself, preparing a feast that included burgers, hot dogs, grilled vegetables, salads, and a variety of desserts. Michael was at the grill, flipping burgers and checking the temperature of the ribs that had been slow cooking since dawn. Jasmine and Kevin were setting up a game area with bean bags and a small inflatable pool for the younger kids. The atmosphere was one of excitement and anticipation. As the first guests began to arrive, the Johnsons greeted them warmly, offering drinks and encouraging them to make themselves at home. A few neighbors showed up, bringing dishes to share and complimenting the setup. They chatted with Michael and Angela, getting to know them better and gradually easing into the festive spirit. But for every neighbor who attended, there were others who stayed away, influenced by Mrs. Thompson's whispered warnings. Some cited other commitments, while others simply didn't show up without any explanation. The Johnsons noticed the absences, but they didn't let it dampen their spirits. They were determined to make the best of the day and enjoy the company of those who had come. Mrs. Thompson, true to her word, did not attend. Instead, she watched the barbecue unfold from the safety of her living room, peering out through the lace curtains that framed her front window. Her eyes narrowed as she saw the mix of people gathered in the Johnsons' backyard. Young and old, black and white, families with children, and even a few single professionals. The sight of the diverse crowd only fueled her anger. To her, it was a clear sign that the neighborhood was changing in ways she couldn't accept. The laughter, the music, the smell of grilling food, it all grated on her nerves, a stark reminder that the Johnsons were different, and that difference was being embraced by some of her neighbors. She couldn't understand how they could be so easily swayed, how they could overlook the Johnsons' obvious differences and welcome them into the community. It felt like a betrayal, a violation of everything Maplewood had always stood for in her mind. As the afternoon wore on, Mrs. Thompson's frustration grew. She paced her living room, occasionally glancing out the window, each glance only heightening her sense of isolation. She wanted nothing more than for the barbecue to be over, for the noise to stop, for everything to go back to the way it had been before the Johnsons moved in. But the laughter and music continued, the sound of clinking glasses and children's voices carrying through the air. The Johnsons were hosting their barbecue with warmth and hospitality, unaware of the storm brewing in Mrs. Thompson's heart. As the sun began to set and the barbecue started to wind down, Michael and Angela stood together, watching their guests enjoy the evening. Despite the smaller turnout, they felt a sense of accomplishment. They had set out to bring their neighbors together, and while not everyone had come, those who did seemed to be having a good time. "We did it," Angela said, leaning her head on Michael's shoulder. "Yeah, we did," Michael replied, wrapping an arm around her. "And I think we made some new friends today." Jasmine and Kevin joined them, both looking tired but happy. "Can we do this again next year?" Jasmine asked. Michael chuckled. "We'll see. Let's see how your mom feels after cleaning up." Angela laughed softly. "We'll definitely think about it, Jasmine. But for now, let's just enjoy the moment." As they stood together, a family united by love and resilience, they had no idea what lay ahead. Mrs. Thompson's growing resentment was a storm waiting to break, and the Johnsons would soon find themselves at the center of a conflict they hadn't anticipated. But for now, in the warmth of the setting sun and the fading laughter of their guests, the Johnsons were content. They had taken a step toward becoming part of the community, and they were hopeful that in time, others would follow. Mrs. Edith Thompson sat by her window, staring at the Johnsons' backyard, her eyes narrowing at the sight of their barbecue continuing well into the evening. She had watched as their guests arrived, listened as laughter and music filled the air, and witnessed a few neighbors mingling with the new family. Every moment of it gnawed at her. The Johnsons, in her mind, were intruders, and the idea that they were being embraced by the community infuriated her. She huffed, crossing her arms tightly across her chest, her foot tapping impatiently against the hardwood floor. How could they be so brazen? How could they think they could just come in, throw a big party, and act like they belonged? The thought of them feeling comfortable in her neighborhood made her blood boil. It was time to put a stop to this. Mrs. Thompson picked up her phone, her hand trembling slightly, and dialed 911. Her breath quickened as she listened to the line ring, each second stretching longer than the last. 911. "What's your emergency?" The dispatcher's voice came through, calm and professional. Mrs. Thompson swallowed, then began, her voice laced with feigned concern. "Yes, hello. I'd like to report a disturbance," she said, her words carefully chosen. "There's a lot of noise coming from my neighbor's house. It's been going on for hours now. I'm worried something might be wrong." The dispatcher responded with a few routine questions, and Mrs. Thompson answered them all, making sure to paint the picture she wanted the police to see. She spoke of loud music, shouting, and what she described as suspicious behavior. She even hinted at possible illegal activity, her tone dropping to a whisper as if she feared being overheard. "They're new to the neighborhood," she added, as if that explained everything. "I don't know who all these people are, and I'm concerned for our safety." The dispatcher assured her that officers would be sent to check out the situation and ended the call. Mrs. Thompson hung up the phone, a twisted sense of satisfaction settling over her. In her mind, she had done the right thing. She had taken a stand to protect her neighborhood from these unwanted outsiders. She had no doubt that once the police arrived, they would take care of the problem. She returned to her post by the window, her gaze fixed on the Johnsons' house. The barbecue was still in full swing, the sound of laughter and conversation drifting over to her. She sneered at the sight, imagining the moment when the police would arrive, lights flashing, and shut it all down. Meanwhile, in the Johnsons' backyard, Michael and Angela were enjoying the evening with their guests. The barbecue had been a success, and the atmosphere was warm and relaxed. A few neighbors who had attended were deep in conversation with Michael, talking about his new role as police chief and getting to know him on a personal level. Others were mingling with Angela, who was sharing stories about their move and their hopes for settling into the community. Jasmine and Kevin were playing with a few of the neighborhood kids, their laughter filling the air. The smell of grilled food lingered, mixing with the sweet scent of jasmine flowers that Angela had planted along the fence. It was a perfect evening, and the Johnsons felt a sense of belonging that they had longed for since moving in. Angela glanced over at Michael, smiling as she saw him laughing with one of the neighbors. She felt a surge of pride seeing her husband in his element, connecting with people and making them feel at ease. This was what they had hoped for, a chance to build a life here, to be part of something meaningful. But that sense of peace was about to be shattered. In the police station, the dispatcher relayed the details of Mrs. Thompson's call to a pair of officers on duty. The complaint seemed routine, just another noise disturbance that needed checking out. The officers, unaware of who the call was about, grabbed their gear and headed out, their minds on autopilot. They had dealt with noise complaints before, and most of the time, they ended with a simple warning or a request to keep the volume down. As they drove through the quiet streets of the neighborhood, the officers chatted idly, not expecting much from the call. One of them glanced at the address on the screen, recognizing the area as one of the newer developments in town. Didn't the new police chief move somewhere around here? One of them mused, glancing at his partner. The other officer shrugged. Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure, though. They continued on, the flashing lights of their car reflecting off the windows of the houses they passed. As they approached the Johnsons' address, they could hear the faint sound of music and voices, growing louder as they neared the house. Mrs. Thompson's heart raced as she saw the police car approaching. She stood at her window, her eyes wide with anticipation. This was it. This was the moment when the Johnsons would be put in their place. She could almost picture it. The officers walking into the backyard, the shocked expressions on the faces of the Johnsons and their guests, the silence that would follow as everyone realized they had overstepped their bounds. She could hardly contain her excitement as she watched the police car pull up to the curb in front of the Johnsons' house. The officers got out, their expressions neutral, and began walking up the driveway. Mrs. Thompson leaned in closer to the window, her breath catching in her throat. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She expected nothing less than a confrontation, one that would send a clear message that the Johnsons didn't belong in her neighborhood. In the Johnsons' backyard, the sound of approaching footsteps caught Michael's attention. He turned to see the two officers walking toward them, their faces serious. The mood of the barbecue shifted instantly, the laughter and chatter dying down as everyone noticed the police presence. Angela looked at Michael, a question in her eyes. "What's going on?" she whispered. Michael's brow furrowed as he stepped forward to meet the officers. His years of experience told him that something was off. He had been in situations like this before, but it felt different now that it was happening at his home, in front of his family and friends. "Good evening, officers," Michael greeted them, his voice calm but authoritative. "Can I help you?" The officers hesitated for a moment, their eyes widening slightly as they recognized Michael. One of them cleared his throat, clearly surprised. "Chief Johnson? We didn't realize this was your residence." Michael's jaw tightened slightly. "What seems to be the problem?" The officer glanced down at his notes, feeling the weight of the situation. "We received a call about a noise disturbance and some suspicious activity in the area," he explained, his tone more respectful now. Michael's expression remained neutral, but inside, he felt a mix of anger and disappointment. He knew exactly what this was. Someone had called the police on them simply because they didn't want the Johnsons in their neighborhood. "I see," Michael said, his voice steady. "Well, as you can see, we're just having a barbecue with a few of our neighbors. There's nothing suspicious going on here." The officers exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. They could see that the situation was nothing like what had been described in the call. It was just a family gathering, nothing more. "We'll take a quick look around, just to be thorough," one of the officers said, his tone apologetic. "Of course," Michael replied, stepping aside to let them pass. "Feel free." As the officers made a cursory inspection of the backyard, checking that everything was in order, the tension in the air was palpable. The Johnsons' guests watched in silence, their earlier cheer replaced by a sense of unease. Angela stood by Michael, her hand gripping his arm. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Michael gave her a reassuring squeeze. "It's going to be fine. They're just doing their job." But even as he said the words, Michael couldn't shake the feeling of being targeted. He had dealt with situations like this before, but never in his own home. It was a bitter reminder that despite his position, despite everything he had achieved, there were still people who saw him and his family as outsiders. Mrs. Thompson continued to watch from her window, her excitement slowly turning to confusion as she saw the officers talking calmly with Michael. She expected confrontation, maybe even an arrest, but instead it seemed like nothing was happening. The officers were looking around, but there was no urgency, no raised voices, no accusations being made. "What's going on?" she thought, her heart sinking. "Why aren't they doing anything?" Her frustration grew as she saw the officers finishing their inspection and returning to speak with Michael. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but from the looks on their faces, it was clear that they weren't taking any action. They weren't doing what she had hoped they would. Back in the Johnsons' backyard, the officers wrapped up their brief inspection and returned to Michael. One of them spoke, his voice apologetic. "Everything looks fine here, Chief. We're sorry for the inconvenience. It looks like this was just a misunderstanding." Michael nodded, keeping his emotions in check. "No problem, officers. I appreciate you checking in. Have a good evening." The officers nodded in return, their expressions a mix of respect and embarrassment, before turning to leave. As they walked back to their car, the tension in the backyard began to lift, but the remnants of the encounter lingered in the air like a stubborn cloud. Angela exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I can't believe someone called the police on us," she murmured, her voice tinged with disbelief and hurt. Michael pulled her close, resting his chin on her head. "I can," he said quietly, the weight of reality pressing down on him. He had always known that being in law enforcement wouldn't shield him or his family from prejudice. It was a harsh truth he had hoped his children wouldn't have to learn so soon, but here they were. Around them, the guests began to relax again, though the atmosphere had undoubtedly changed. Conversations resumed, but they were quieter, more subdued. The children, sensing the shift in mood, stayed closer to their parents. Jasmine and Kevin, who had been playing near the fence, approached their parents with questioning eyes. "Daddy, why were the police here?" Kevin asked, his voice small. Michael knelt down to his son's level, forcing a reassuring smile. It's okay, buddy. Someone made a mistake and the police just came to check things out. Everything's fine. But why would someone call the police? Jasmine pressed, her young mind grappling with the injustice of it all. Michael sighed, wishing he could shield them from the complexities of the world a little longer. Sometimes people get scared of things they don't understand. And when they're scared, they make bad decisions. But the important thing is that we're all safe and nothing bad happened. Jasmine seemed to accept this explanation, though she wasn't entirely satisfied. Kevin, on the other hand, still looked confused, but he nodded, trusting his father's words. Angela bent down and kissed their heads. Why don't you two go play with your friends? Everything's fine now. The kids hesitated for a moment, then ran off to rejoin the other children, though they kept glancing back at their parents, still trying to make sense of the situation. Across the street, Mrs. Thompson's hands clenched in a fist as she watched the police car pull away without incident. Her frustration was palpable, her face flushed with a mix of anger and confusion. How could this have gone so wrong? She had expected the police to handle the situation, to show the Johnsons that they couldn't just come in her neighborhood and act like they owned the place. But instead, the officers had left without so much as a reprimand. She felt a pang of fear as she realized that her plan had backfired. The Johnsons had not been intimidated. If anything, they might now see her as the one who was out of place. Panic began to creep into her thoughts. What if they figured out it was her who made the call? What if the other neighbors started to side with them against her? Mrs. Thompson paced her living room, her mind racing. She had to do something, but what? How could she regain control of the situation? Her thoughts were a jumble of fear, resentment, and the nagging realization that perhaps she had underestimated the Johnsons. But even as these doubts crept in, her resolve hardened. She would not let them win. This was her neighborhood, and she would do whatever it took to keep it that way. Back at the Johnsons' barbecue, the mood had lightened somewhat as the guests tried to move past the interruption. Michael and Angela made the rounds, checking in with everyone and thanking them for coming. They wanted to make sure that the incident didn't overshadow the entire evening. One of the neighbors, Mrs. Wilson, a kind elderly woman who had been one of the few to attend the barbecue, approached Angela with a sympathetic look. "I'm so sorry about what happened, dear," she said softly. "It's such a shame that someone would do that to you." Angela smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. It's unfortunate, but we're not going to let it ruin our night." Mrs. Wilson nodded, her expression sad, but understanding. "You and your family are always welcome here, Angela. Don't let a few bad apples make you feel otherwise." "Thank you. That means a lot," Angela replied, squeezing the older woman's hand. As the evening wore on, the barbecue gradually wound down. The guests, though shaken by the earlier incident, expressed their support for the Johnsons before leaving. Many of them offered words of encouragement and promised to stand by the family in the future. By the time the last guest had left, the Johnsons were alone in their backyard. The remains of the barbecue were scattered around. Empty plates, glasses, and the lingering smell of grilled food. The sky was dark now, the stars twinkling above them, but the warmth of the earlier festivities had cooled. Michael and Angela sat down at the patio table, both feeling the weight of the evening settling over them. The children had gone inside, tired from the day's events, and the house was quiet. "What a night," Angela said softly, breaking the silence. Michael nodded, his thoughts still on the encounter with the police. "I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but I didn't expect something like this to happen so soon." Angela looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and determination. "Do you think this is just the beginning?" Michael considered her question, his mind racing with possibilities. "I don't know, but I do know that we're not going anywhere. We belong here just as much as anyone else." Angela reached across the table and took his hand. "We'll get through this, Michael. Together." He squeezed her hand, grateful for her strength. "Yeah, we will." For a moment, they sat in silence, taking comfort in each other's presence. The night air was cool, and the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter as they held on to the hope that things would get better. But deep down, they both knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Mrs. Thompson's actions had revealed an undercurrent of prejudice that wouldn't disappear overnight. There would be more challenges, more moments where they would have to stand up for themselves and their right to be a part of this community. But the Johnsons were no strangers to adversity. They had faced challenges before, and they would face them again. What mattered most was that they had each other, and as long as they stood together, they knew they could overcome anything. As the night drew to a close, Michael and Angela got up and began to clean up the remnants of the barbecue. They worked in silence, their minds occupied with thoughts of the future and what it might hold for their family. But as they picked up the pieces, they also picked up the strength to keep going, to keep fighting for the life they wanted to build here. And in that quiet moment, under the starlit sky, the Johnsons made a silent vow to themselves and to each other. No matter what happened, they would not be driven out. They would stay, they would thrive, and they would show everyone that they belonged. The following week, Michael Johnson decided to take a proactive step to address the tensions within the neighborhood. He knew that while the incident with Mrs. Thompson had been a stark reminder of the underlying prejudices in the community, it also presented an opportunity for growth and understanding. To that end, he organized a community meeting at the local recreation center, hoping to foster dialogue and build bridges. Angela spent the days leading up to the meeting preparing flyers and personally inviting neighbors. She wanted everyone to feel included and heard, hoping that the gathering would be a chance for the community to come together and address the issues openly. On the day of the meeting, the recreation center's auditorium was set up with rows of chairs facing a podium at the front. Michael and Angela arrived early, arranging refreshments and ensuring everything was in place. As people began to trickle in, Michael greeted each neighbor with a warm smile, trying to create an atmosphere of openness. The room slowly filled with a diverse crowd of residents. Some were familiar faces, like Mrs. Wilson, who had supported the Johnsons from the start, while others were neighbors who had been distant or hesitant since the incident. Michael noticed Mrs. Thompson sitting in the back, her demeanor guarded and anxious. He could tell she was feeling the weight of her actions and was unsure of how to address the situation. When the meeting finally began, Michael stepped up to the podium, his posture confident yet approachable. He took a deep breath, scanning the room and making eye contact with as many people as he could. The chatter quieted, and he began to speak. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Michael Johnson, and I am your new police chief. I know that the past week has been difficult for many of us, and I want to take this opportunity to address some of the issues that have come to light." Michael paused, allowing his words to sink in. "As many of you are aware, there was an incident at my family's barbecue last week. A complaint was made, and the police responded to it. I want to be clear that we are committed to maintaining the safety and well-being of everyone in this community. However, it's important that we also address the underlying issues that led to that complaint." He continued, "Our neighborhood has always prided itself on being a welcoming and inclusive place. Yet, incidents like this remind us that we still have work to do. We need to ensure that everyone, regardless of their background, feels that they belong here." Michael's speech was met with nods of agreement from many in the audience. He spoke about the importance of respect and understanding, and how prejudices, whether overt or subtle, could harm the fabric of their community. After Michael's speech, he opened the floor for questions and comments. The room was filled with a mix of apprehension and anticipation. Some neighbors were eager to express their support, while others were hesitant but hopeful that the meeting could lead to positive change. Mrs. Wilson was one of the first to speak. "I want to thank you, Chief Johnson, for organizing this meeting. It's important that we talk about these issues openly. I've been a resident here for over 30 years, and I've always believed that our community should be inclusive and welcoming to all." Her words were met with murmurs of agreement from the audience. Michael smiled gratefully at her. "Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Your support means a lot to us." Another neighbor, Mr. Ramirez, stood up. "I think it's important to acknowledge that this issue isn't just about one person or one incident. It's about how we as a community respond to these situations. We need to stand together and support each other." Michael nodded in agreement. "Absolutely. This is about building a stronger, more united community. We need to ensure that everyone feels heard and valued." As the discussion continued, several residents shared their own experiences and concerns. There were stories of discrimination, misunderstandings, and moments of prejudice that had been overlooked or ignored. The dialogue was emotional and, at times, uncomfortable, but it was also a necessary step towards healing. Mrs. Thompson, who had been sitting quietly, finally spoke. Her voice was shaky but determined. "I want to apologize for my actions last week. I made a mistake, and I understand that now. I didn't consider the impact it would have on the Johnsons or the community." Michael looked at her with a mixture of empathy and firmness. "Thank you for your honesty, Mrs. Thompson. Apologies are an important part of moving forward, but actions speak louder than words. It's crucial that we all work together to make this neighborhood a better place for everyone." Mrs. Thompson nodded, her expression somber. "I understand, and I am willing to do whatever it takes to make amends." In the weeks that followed, the community began to show signs of change. The meeting had sparked a renewed sense of unity and commitment among many residents. Michael and Angela continued to engage with their neighbors, organizing additional events and activities designed to foster connections and promote inclusivity. One of the initiatives that gained traction was a neighborhood block party organized by Michael and Angela to celebrate the diversity of their community. The event featured food from different cultures, music, and activities for children. It was a chance for everyone to come together and enjoy each other's company in a relaxed and friendly environment. The block party was a resounding success. Neighbors who had been hesitant or distant began to mingle and interact, breaking down barriers and building new relationships. Michael and Angela took the opportunity to chat with as many people as possible, sharing their experiences and listening to the concerns of others. Mrs. Thompson, who had initially been wary of attending, showed up at the event. She was greeted with cautious but polite interactions from other residents. Michael and Angela approached her, extending a warm welcome. "I'm glad you could make it, Mrs. Thompson," Angela said, offering her a plate of food. "I hope you're enjoying the event." Mrs. Thompson accepted the food, her expression softening. "Thank you, Angela. I really appreciate the invitation. I'm trying to understand and be a better part of this community." Michael smiled at her. "It's a step in the right direction. We're all here to support each other and build a stronger neighborhood." As the months went by, the Johnsons continued to be active participants in their community. They worked on various initiatives to promote inclusivity and understanding, such as organizing educational workshops and hosting open forums for residents to discuss important issues. The neighborhood, once fractured by prejudice and misunderstanding, began to heal. New friendships were formed, and old grievances were addressed. The Johnsons became known not just as the new family in town, but as advocates for positive change and community cohesion. Mrs. Thompson, who had initially been resistant, made genuine efforts to integrate and contribute positively to the community. Her transformation was gradual, but she started participating in neighborhood activities and showing support for the diverse groups in the area. Michael and Angela's children, Jasmine and Kevin, thrived in their new environment. They made friends from various backgrounds and enjoyed the inclusive spirit of their neighborhood. Their experiences reflected the positive impact of the changes that had taken place. The Johnson story became a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of standing up for what is right. Despite the challenges they faced, they managed to turn a difficult situation into an opportunity for growth and understanding. The Johnsons knew that their journey had been just one part of a larger process, but they were proud of the progress they had made. They had faced adversity with grace and determination, and their story served as a reminder that change is possible when people come together with a shared commitment to fairness and respect. In the end, the neighborhood became a place where differences were celebrated and every resident had a voice. The Johnsons' experience had shown that even in the face of prejudice and misunderstanding, a community united by empathy and understanding could overcome any obstacle and build a brighter future for all. Months after the neighborhood had come together to address the tensions and misunderstandings, the Johnsons began to notice a shift in the community's spirit. The initial awkwardness had faded, replaced by a genuine desire to foster lasting connections. Michael and Angela, inspired by the positive changes they had witnessed, decided to embark on a new project that would further solidify the sense of unity within their neighborhood: a community garden. The idea was simple: create a shared space where residents could come together to grow vegetables, flowers, and herbs. It was intended not only as a practical project, but also as a symbolic gesture of growth and cooperation. Michael and Angela pitched the idea to the neighborhood association and were met with enthusiasm from many residents. The community garden project kicked off with a planning meeting held at the local park. Michael and Angela presented their vision, highlighting the benefits of such a space, promoting healthy eating, encouraging outdoor activity, and providing a venue for neighbors to interact in a positive setting. Mrs. Thompson, who had been making a concerted effort to be more involved in the community, spoke up during the meeting. "I think this is a wonderful idea. It's a way for us to come together and work on something that benefits everyone. I'd love to help with the planning and maintenance." Her willingness to contribute was met with nods of approval from other residents. Michael and Angela were pleased to see Mrs. Thompson embracing the spirit of collaboration, and her involvement marked a significant step in her journey toward reconciliation. The community rallied around the garden initiative. Volunteers of all ages came together to clear the land, prepare the soil, and build raised beds for planting. The garden was designed to include various sections: a vegetable patch, a flower garden, and an herb section. There was also a designated area for children to grow their own mini gardens, allowing them to learn about plants and nature. Michael and Angela took on the role of project coordinators, organizing workdays and coordinating with local businesses for donations of seeds, tools, and other gardening supplies. The neighborhood's businesses were eager to support the initiative, contributing both in-kind donations and financial support. As the garden began to take shape, it quickly became a hub of activity. Neighbors gathered to work side by side, sharing tips and stories as they planted and tended to the garden. The process was therapeutic for many, offering a respite from the everyday stresses and an opportunity to forge new friendships. Mrs. Thompson, who had initially been cautious, found herself genuinely enjoying the work. She was often seen working alongside her new friends, chatting and laughing as they planted flowers or harvested vegetables. The garden became a space where old grudges were left behind and new bonds were forged. As summer turned to fall, the garden began to yield its first crops. The neighborhood planned a harvest festival to celebrate their achievements and to showcase the fruits of their labor. The event was set to be a community-wide celebration, with booths featuring produce from the garden, homemade jams and preserves, and even a small farmer's market with goods from local vendors. The festival was held in the same park where the garden had been conceived. Colorful banners and decorations adorned the space, and a stage was set up for live music and entertainment. Children's activities, including face painting and a petting zoo, added to the festive atmosphere. On the day of the Harvest Festival, the park was bustling with activity. Families strolled through the booths, sampling fresh vegetables and enjoying homemade treats. The live music provided a cheerful backdrop, and the sense of community was palpable. Michael and Angela walked through the crowd, greeting neighbors and enjoying the lively atmosphere. They were approached by Mrs. Thompson, who had taken on a prominent role in organizing the festival. "I just wanted to thank you both for spearheading this project," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "It's been a wonderful experience, and I think it's really brought us all together." Michael smiled warmly. "I'm glad to hear that, Mrs. Thompson. It's been a rewarding experience for all of us." Angela added, "We couldn't have done it without everyone's support. It's been amazing to see how this garden has brought people together." As the years passed, the community garden continued to thrive. It became a cherished part of the neighborhood, a testament to the power of collaboration and the importance of working together to build a stronger community. The garden served as a gathering place for various events throughout the year, including seasonal festivals, educational workshops, and volunteer days. It became a space where residents could come together, share their knowledge, and build lasting relationships. Michael and Angela remained actively involved, often leading gardening workshops and organizing community events. They continued to advocate for inclusivity and understanding, using their experiences to educate and inspire others. Mrs. Thompson, who had once been a symbol of resistance, became an advocate for community engagement. She volunteered regularly at the garden and took on leadership roles in organizing events. Her transformation was a testament to the power of change and the impact of collective effort. The Johnsons' children, Jasmine and Kevin, grew up with a deep appreciation for the values of community and cooperation. They actively participated in the garden, helping with planting and harvesting, and learning the importance of giving back. The neighborhood, once divided by prejudice and misunderstanding, had evolved into a model of inclusivity and unity. The garden stood as a symbol of the positive changes that could be achieved when people came together with a shared vision and a commitment to making their community a better place. As Michael and Angela looked back on their journey, they felt a profound sense of accomplishment. They had faced significant challenges, but through perseverance and a commitment to fostering understanding, they had helped to transform their neighborhood. The garden had not only provided a space for residents to grow food and enjoy each other's company, but it also served as a catalyst for personal growth and community healing. The initial tensions and conflicts had given way to a more inclusive and supportive environment, where everyone felt valued and respected. Michael and Angela knew that the journey was ongoing and that there would always be work to do to maintain and build upon the progress they had made. But they were confident that the lessons learned and the relationships forged would continue to guide them as they worked towards a better future for their community. As they walked through the garden, surrounded by the vibrant colors of blooming flowers and the rich scent of fresh herbs, Michael and Angela felt a deep sense of pride. They had faced adversity with resilience and grace, and their efforts had paved the way for a brighter and more inclusive future. The Johnson story was one of hope and transformation, a reminder that change is possible when people come together with a shared commitment to understanding and respect. The community garden, with its lush greenery and thriving plants, stood as a lasting testament to the power of unity and the strength of a community bound by common values. In the end, The neighborhood had not only grown as a community, but had also cultivated a sense of belonging and inclusivity that would endure for years to come. The Johnsons had helped to sow the seeds of change, and their efforts had blossomed into a flourishing and vibrant community where everyone had a place and a voice. What would you have done if you were in Michael and Angela's position and faced such unexpected hostility from a neighbor? Would you have responded with grace and unity, or would you have hesitated? If you enjoyed this story of community, resilience, and reconciliation, please consider subscribing to my channel. I put a lot of effort into creating these impactful narratives, and your support truly means the world to me. Thank you for being a part of this journey.